The Premier League's financial supremacy is getting out of hand. Everyone wants Nicolas Jackson, another world record transfer in women's football, and this 14-year-old will now train with Man United's first team? This is DMAC Daily. Remember the universal outrage that was met with the proposal of a European Super League back in 2021? That dystopian concept that would completely dismantle the European football ecosystem to benefit a select few ultra-wealthy clubs. Well, thankfully that hasn't gone ahead, at least for the time being, but all the while, the Premier League has essentially taken its place. We all know it's the most popular and financially lucrative league worldwide, but the manner at which Premier League clubs are spending in 2025 just proves their economic dominance. As of August the 22nd, they have currently spent £2.37 billion, overtaking the previous record figures spent in 2023. Yet with 9 days to go, and with some huge deals still on the horizon, I wouldn't be surprised to see this overall total reach $3 billion. But it's when you compare their spend to the other Big Five leagues that you really see the scale of the financial discrepancy, because you take the spend of Liga, La Liga, the Bundesliga, and Serie A, then combine it, and it's still less than the Premier League's. It's even crazier when you look at the net spend. Only La Liga has spent more on incoming transfers than overall sales, whereas the Prem is net negative to the degree of £1 billion. Everyone was freaking out that the Saudi Pro League would come in and destabilize the football market, but the Prem has done exactly that. In what other league would you have all three newly promoted teams casually dropping 9 digits in the transfer window? Look at Sunderland, for instance. If you exclude the Premier League, only 2 other teams in world football have outspent them this summer in Atletico and Real Madrid. So I will reiterate, the Premier League is basically the Super League. This is why Real Madrid and Barca are still spearheading this concept in 2025, despite its unpopularity. Sure, they are still global brands themselves, but their domestic competition isn't lucrative enough. They don't care about La Liga or any other European league. They're only interested in self-preservation long term, something La Liga may not be able to provide. Staying in the Premier League, and it's officially over for Nicolas Jackson. For the last 2 years, he'd been Chelsea's first choice striker, but having been somewhat inconsistent throughout, the Blues have ultimately lost patience, bringing in a further 2 strikers this window, with Jackson not even making the bench in their opening matchday squad. It's wild to see how quickly he's fallen out of favor. Sure, he's been slandered frequently since arriving in 2023, but the feeling internally at Chelsea had always been that Jackson could become world class. This is the same guy that Pochettino claimed has the, quote, potential to be one of the greatest strikers in the Premier League. And as recently as April this year, Maresca stated, "My ideal number 9 is exactly Nicolas Jackson." 4 months later though, it's a completely different story, with Maresca more or less confirming they're gonna get rid. But his next club is still anyone's guess. Newcastle were the early frontrunners, having seemingly missed out on every other forward target available, but around the same time, Bayern Munich had credible links to the player too. Interest had cooled for a few weeks, but in the last 48 hours, these 2 clubs have made further inquiries, and a new contender has since emerged in Aston Villa. Remember, Unai Emery previously coached Jackson back at Villarreal, with the Senegalese striker famously saying, "He taught me everything about football." Fabrizio Romano stated he's Villa's top target. The problem, however, is that Chelsea's current evaluation is around £60 million. Villa appear unlikely to meet this figure due to ongoing financial constraints. Similarly, Bayern don't seem too keen on forking out that kind of money. Newcastle could theoretically afford him, but with Isak and Visser's ongoing sagas, it may be a tall order striking a deal. I think the most likely outcome is a loan deal with either an option or obligation to buy, with Villa the current favourites as of recording this. Either way, I'm conflicted with Jackson. In the most competitive league in Europe, he's done pretty well. Back-to-back double-digit goal seasons in the Prem, 42 GA in 81 games. That's decent output. That being said, his finishing isn't elite, and most frustratingly, this guy has a clear discipline problem. 2 reds and 18 yellow cards in 2 years from a striker. That's not normal. An enigma of a footballer, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him tear up elsewhere. The quality is there after all. Now for some quick-fire transfer news, and Victor Boniface is on his way to Milan in a $5 million loan with a $24 million option to buy at the season's end, whilst Inter Milan signed Lens's Andy Diouf for $20 million. Douglas Luiz departs Juve for Nottingham Forest on loan with a $30 million obligation to buy. Loic Bade signs for Leverkusen in a $29 million deal. He'll be joined by City wonder kid Claudio Echeverri on a season-long year-long loan. Exiled Marseille winger Jonathan Rowe has a new home at Bologna in a 19 mil transfer. Edson Alvarez joins Mourinho's Fenerbahce on loan, and Chelsea sell Renato Vega to Villarreal for 29.5 mil. Over 15 mil profit in 1 year for a player who barely featured for the Blues. Not bad, Chelsea. Meanwhile, in the women's game, a new world record transfer has taken place, with Tigres' Lisbeth Avaye joining NWSL side Orlando Pride for £1.1 million. The 25-year-old winger was Tigres' all-time leading goal scorer and recently scored one of the most insane goals I've ever seen. A shoo-in for this year's Puskás Award in my opinion, but it's wild to see the figures coming into the women's game. They've now witnessed 3 world record transfers come in the year of 2025 alone. In January, Naomi Girma joined Chelsea for a record £900,000, which was eclipsed in July when Olivia Smith made the move from Liverpool to Arsenal for £1 million. The first female to break the 7-digit figures. Not even a full month later though, Ovalle now holds the title of world's most expensive female player. And finally, we gotta talk about a youth prodigy that could legit be England's next superstar. And I'm not talking about 16-year-old Rio Engamoa or 15-year-old Max Dowman, who had both excelled in preseason and looked destined for the top themselves, but rather an even younger talent in 14-year-old JJ Gabriel. Granted, this kid has been generating hype for some time now. At just 9 years old, he went viral nicknamed Kid Messi in a YouTube video that racked up 28 million views before joining Manchester United. 5 years later, he would then sign a lucrative contract with Nike. Over the summer, he was wanted by a host of top clubs worldwide, but instead signed a contract extension with the Red Devils and has continued to rapidly develop. Just last weekend, he made his U18 Premier League debut and proceeded to tear up, catching the attention of Bruno Amorim, who is set to reward the Wonder Kid by calling him up to train with the first team. That is just wild. This kid's literally too young to even feature in the FA Youth Cup, yet is already getting senior call-ups. Could you imagine this lad pulling up to school? This might be the most aura a Year 9 student has ever had. And with the name JJ Gabriel, bro's destined for stardom. Anyways guys, that's all for today's DMAC.